Hi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 tips for loose lead walking. Okay, let's get right into it. So tip number 1 is level up. And by that I mean, make sure that you manage your expectations for your dog. So we can't expect, just because they can walk nicely in one area, for in a different area with a lot more distractions, that they're going to be able to apply that same understanding of walking nicely. So everything that we go through on the top tips, make sure that you level up. So my suggestion would be to write down 5 places, starting with the easiest place with the lowest amount of distractions to the most challenging place that your dog would struggle to walk nicely on a lead. So for me, Chase's level 1, being the lowest level of distractions, would be somewhere like our garden, and that's where I would start playing, or where I did start playing a lot of these games to get him focused on me. And our most distracting level 5 situation would be somewhere completely new with lots of smells and lots of things that he wants to investigate, somewhere like a garden centre or a field or a walk that we've never been to before. So, and then in between my lowest level and my highest level, I maybe write down 2 or 3 in between. So something like the estate might be a level 2, so just walking in the neighbourhood, which he's more familiar with, but there are still some distractions. There's still the odd cat or another dog that would be distracting for him, and just build up from there. So that is tip number 1. Okay, so for tip number 2, it will be, not every walk has to be a training walk. So be really clear when you are training and when you're expecting your dog to walk nicely versus just a non-training walk. And that's really important, because it can be really hard when you're first starting out and the dog's pulling a lot and you're trying to work through that. It's impossible to, walk far and exercise long as the dogs, and to meet the dog's basic needs while getting them to still walk nicely. And then you're in that dilemma of, well, I don't want to undo all the good work and just let them pull, but I need to get them to exercise. So it can be a really tricky balance. So what I would suggest is have it really clear in your head when you're going to do some short training walks when you're starting out versus non-training walks. And when it's a non-training walk, make sure the dog understands that. Now, the simplest way I used to do this with Chase was to use a harness. So a harness meant it was a non-training walk. I wasn't expecting him to walk perfectly. He didn't have those skills developed yet around a lot of distractions. So if I was going for a walk that was maybe a level 3 upwards to begin with, where I knew he wouldn't have the skills to walk nicely in all those distractions, I would put a harness on. And the harness just feels differently for Chase. When I put a harness on, typically we go for runs, and when we're running, I'm expecting him to pull and things like canicross. And the same with agility. Sometimes I hold him back and expect to get some drive from the harness. So he knows that he's able to pull with the harness. In fact, it's encouraged. So if we're going for a walk where I know he's not going to be able to walk nicely, so for example, when we first started out and I was really struggling with his loose lead walking, if ever I went to somewhere really exciting and new, or we went to a walk with some of the family and I knew he was going to be super excited and wasn't going to be able to walk to heel, then I would put the harness on, and then I didn't feel like I was undoing all the hard work from when he just had his flat collar and lead on. So when his flat collar and lead was on, we were doing a training walk and we were teaching him the skills for loose lead walking. And when the harness was on, there was less rules and he could walk. And if he did pull, I didn't feel like I'd undone all that hard work. Obviously, I would still try on those kind of walks to get some engagement and get him to walk within proximity, but it wasn't the same expectation as when it was a training walk and he had the flat collar on. So that would be my tip number 2. Okay, so tip number 3 is all about engagement. This is absolutely the best thing for loose lead walking. It's really challenging to be more exciting than the distractions, especially when you're in a really distracting environment, which is why tip 1 was about leveling up this skill slowly. But the only way I found to get Chase to walk nicely is through engagement with me. No amount of treats. I tried so many different techniques, one of which was constantly luring him back with a treat. He would walk a step, he would take the treat and then trot off ahead of me again and be pulling. So I would go through a whole bag of food for his breakfast or tea on a walk, and I didn't feel like he was learning to actually walk next to me. It just felt like he knew he needed to come back, grab a treat, and then he would be off ahead of me again. So engagement is all about helping the dog learn that the value is from being close to you and being in proximity and in the heel position. So I will go through a few example games on how to build that value of engagement, and these are what you can take on you for different training walks, and as I said, work on each of these through the different levels. So to start with, you will be starting all of these techniques at a level 1, make sure the dog's really engaged, and then start to build up until you're in more distracting environments and the dog's still willing to play. Okay, so we're going to show some different engagement skills. So one of these that I would do would be throwing a piece of food behind me and then waiting for Chase to come back into position next to me, and then as he did, I would be throwing another piece behind me. Obviously be careful, don't throw it too far while they're on lead, or if you're playing this somewhere safe, you could actually drop the lead for this. So this isn't just about having the dog walk in a perfect heel position. We're looking for loose lead walking. We're looking to build value for the dog being close to you and not off ahead of you and pull into the next thing. So let's just have a look at what that would be like. Chase, come on. Good job. Okay, so if I was to start way back here and we're going to be walking towards you, then I might just drop a piece of food and then let him get it, and then as he walks closely, I'm just going to drop another piece of food. Good job. And then I'm going to drop another piece of food. And you can see he's looking at me in between each food, and see how here I've slowed down and he's not looking to get ahead because he knows that that wouldn't be advantageous because the food's actually coming from me and it's being dropped behind him. So just as I say, don't throw it too far, unless I could show one where we drop the lead slightly, again if it's safe to do so. And I'm going to throw the piece behind, I'm going to wait for him to come back, and then I'm going to throw it behind again. And then just try and build up to having a few steps where he's walking with you and then we're throwing the food behind. And again. Good boy, come here. Okay, so another skill that I like to do to help build engagement when out and about in a distracting environment is just using some basic commands. So I like to practice these in the heel position. So just doing something like a sit, stand, down, sit. Good. Stand, sit, down. Break. Good boy. So you can see just doing something like this just for a few seconds really builds up his engagement here. Sit, stand, down, stand. Good job. So even when I've dropped the food, we can see that Chase is going to be looking at me and thinking, what have I got to do next to earn some more treats? So I've got super high value treats for this in my pouch. We're going to do that one more time. I'm going to go sit, stand, down, down, sit, stand. Good job. Break, good boy. Okay, so that's one that I like to do on the move. So sometimes we'll just be walking along. Let's go this way. So we'll just be walking along and I'll suddenly stop and ask a sit. And ideally you want to try and get them as close to the heel position as possible. So it's okay when you begin in, obviously he stopped just a step ahead of me, but what I would be really striving for is to build up that engagement with him and be exciting. Sit. Good. And then we've got him in that perfect position right next to me. I'm feeding there, and then we're going to go again. Ready? Sit. Oh, bless you. There we go. Very nice. So then you can just drop some random commands down. Good. And I like to do that just to kind of catch him off guard. Break. While we're walking along, and then it suddenly makes him think, oh, I've got an opportunity to earn some rewards here, and then he's more focused on me. So some other skills to kind of build reinforcement when you're in a distracting zone, and it's important to know loose lead walking training doesn't always have to be about walking. It's about getting the dog to focus on you. So he's on the lead and he's got his collar on and it feels like we're ready for a walk, but it's not just about getting from A to B. And that's why it's really important to differentiate between a training walk and a non-training walk. A non-training walk is focused on the exercise side to physically tire the dog out. for the training walk, it doesn't matter how far we travel. We can do a lot of these games on the move, so we can look to go. We might just, you know, only be able to move a short distance without the dog pulling away. Well, that's fine. There's no set amount to travel. We just want to work on getting their engagement on us during this distracting environment. Okay, so we might do things like middle. Good job. And you can do middle on the move. Good job. Just really nice to get his attention on me. Break. Rather than, you know, for example, if there was a cat in the distance or there's cars or people passing by, these things are really good to just try and get their attention back on you. And the last one that I'm going to share, but if you do want some more tips for some engagement games, then be sure to leave a comment in the description below. So what I would like to do, and I have another video on this, we're not doing an orbit, but that is another good skill, which I also have a video on if you want to teach your dog how to orbit. But I have what's called perch and pivot work, and there's a video that I will link in the description below. But what this looks like is to have one piece of food, wait, lure them into that position, and we're going to go switch, and we're going to get them to switch to our other side. And I find that a really good skill for when Chase, we're on a walk and maybe there's a dog coming towards us and I want to be between Chase and the dog. Maybe I think that, you know, the dog's a bit excited and it's not going to be the best meet and greet for Chase. So I want to have myself positioned between him and the other dog. All I'll do is go switch. And my cue for that is just tap on my other side. And then I'm going to reward him in that position. Here. Good boy. Break. So that is tip number 3, all about building engagement. Okay, so for tip number 4, this is all about placement of the reward or the reinforcement. So in this instance, I'm using some treats. You could also use toys as your reinforcement, but what's important when you're using treats in particular is the position where the dog is when they get that reward. And by that I mean, it's no good rewarding the dog, maybe you've been doing some engagement games and then rewarding them out in front of you, because what we're actually teaching them is the value and where they get that reward is in front of us. And the whole point of loose lead walking is ideally we want them to be walking close and to by our side. So you will have seen in the previous tip there was a lot of times that I fed Chase there, and what was important that I always went to him. I didn't have him pulling towards me. He had to wait for the treat to be delivered, and it was always in the heel position at my side. So what I mean by that is if we were to do some drills and we were to do the sit, I always almost tap your side so you know that the food's coming from the right place, and then we're just going to feed that in position. There's no point me getting the treat out as I'm walking along and just go at here and lure him accidentally in front of me and all the reward is and the reinforcement is happening here. So if the dog comes out of position and they're in front of you, just make sure they're back in the heel, and that's when we can actually release and feed the treats. So that is tip number 4. Okay, so for tip number 5, it's all about the position of the leash and where we handle the lead. So what's really important is that we're not holding the lead right at the end and giving the dog all these opportunities to get out ahead of us before they even realize so and they feel any tension whatsoever. So once we've built lots of engagement and they understand they should be close to us, to help encourage that when we're actually ready to start walking in a straight line and hoping for a loose lead walk, we want to make sure that we're setting the dog up for success. So what I like to do is hold the lead almost for this length lead. I like to hold it halfway down here with my right hand when he's walking to heel on my right, and that is almost in line with my hip, and then have the other end of the leash in my left hand. And what that means is as we're starting to move forward, if Chase does start to get ahead of me, I just do a light squeeze on the lead, so none of this yanking the dog, letting them hang themselves, which is a horrible term that I've heard many times for loose lead walking videos. We don't want to let the dog get ahead of us and then yank them and correct them and bring them back. What we want is to actually set them up for success, build the engagement so they know that they need to stay close to us, and then when we're walking, and they do, because dogs naturally walk at a quicker pace, Chase is naturally a quicker pace than I am, so it's a real skill for him to be able to walk at my pace, which is slower. So to just make sure that I'm communicating similar as you would with a bike, when you just gently tap the brakes, you're not actually coming to a complete stop and you're not slamming the brakes on, it's just a gentle squeeze, and that's my way of communicating to Chase we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, a bit too fast, come and slow down and match my pace. So I can show you what that looks like. Good boy. So like I say, I've got one end of the lead in my left hand, the other end just at my right hip, And then what I'll do is I'll walk forward, and if Chase was to start to get out ahead of me, I would just squeeze this lead just back to me and then carry on walking forward again. Okay? So it's really important that if I was to just hold the lead right at the end, then I'm basically encouraging Chase. Well, he's obviously walking perfectly now because we've just been playing some engagement games, and it's quite boring for him to just be going back and two, and there's not too many distractions. If this was somewhere completely new and I just held the end of this leash without any kind of engagement or encouragement by my side, I'm basically telling him, you've got full rein here, you know, go straight out ahead of me, and I'm just gonna hold on for dear life at the end. And that's not what we want. So like I say, just make sure we're really encouraging the dog by holding that short leash by our side and just holding that close to us, and we can just do gentle squeezes just to let them know that they're going a little bit too fast. Now what I also like to do is make sure it's really clear for Chase when I do want to let him go ahead and sniff. So now we're at the point where, you know, maybe up to a level 7 or 8, I can confidently walk on his normal collar and lead and get some level of engagement and loose lead walking. We're not perfect yet, and we've still got a few levels to get to where we're in a completely new environment. I would maybe go back to the harness. But if I was on a normal walk, and I don't want him to walk like a robot by my side the entire time, I think it's really important that the dogs get some enrichment and do lots of scent work and sniffing. So when I want to encourage Chase to go and get out ahead of me, and I'm okay with that, I just make sure that I have a clear cue for that. So I'm still controlling when that can happen. So what I would typically do is this lead is perfect because it can extend, and then I would put that on a longer line, and we would go from, come here. So for example, if we were walking on a heel kind of position, and then I'd drop the lead and I'd go, okay, go sniff. And you're just letting them go off and go and do their own thing, and we could still be moving forwards. And the expectation for me is still not to get too far ahead and feel the tension. If there was a slight bit of a tension, then I'd look to build him some engagement and get him back closer to me. But just make sure there's a real differentiator. I don't think it's fair to expect our dogs not to take in the environment, not to go off and sniff, but we want to make sure it's clear so we're not undoing that good work when we expect them to be in the heel position. So make sure, Chase, one last time. They're walking nicely to heel. I'm holding the lead nice and short, and then I'm going to go, okay, go sniff. And I'm just going to let him and break him, and he can just do whatever he wants and not worry about being in a heel position. Good boy. Okay, so there you have it. They are my top 5 tips for loose lead walking. Please give me a like and subscribe to stay tuned for more videos, and comment below if you enjoyed watching and which of those top 5 tips were most successful for you.